London is a city that never sleeps. But that morning there was something different in the air. Buckingham Palace stood majestically against the cloudy sky, its golden walls reflecting the little light that broke through the clouds. Among hundreds of tourists crowding the main gates, one man stood out, not because of his colorful attire or the camera hanging around his neck, but because of his unwavering discipline. Thomas, one of the unit's most respected royal guards, stood at attention. His red and black uniform, meticulously aligned, carried medals that told stories of bravery and dedication. The expression on his face was serene, almost carved from marble, as his attentive eyes discreetly scanned the horizon. Visitors passed by, took photos, and pointed, marveling at this figure that seemed to have come straight out of history books. But no one imagined that, within minutes, that seemingly impassive guard would be forced to break his silence in a way no one expected. The wind blew gently, carrying with it the excited voices of tourists and the distant sound of London traffic. Little did they know that they were about to witness an event that would go viral on social media and forever change the way people view the British Royal Guards. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to have access to more stories like this. Among the crowd that had gathered on the outskirts of the palace, a figure appeared that was completely out of keeping with the solemn environment. Carlos, a tourist wearing a neon green t-shirt so striking that it almost dazzled everyone's eyes, gestured exaggeratedly as he made his way through the people. His cargo shorts and flip-flops betrayed not only his discomfort with local norms, but also his complete lack of regard for the decorum that the place required. With a mocking smile on his lips and a cell phone in his hand, he got closer and closer to the restricted area. His body posture revealed a mixture of arrogance and defiance, as if the established rules did not apply to him. As he walked, he commented out loud about how it was all one big tourist act. The other visitors began to notice his inappropriate behavior, exchanging worried looks among themselves. Carlos seemed to feed off this negative attention, increasing his theatrical gestures even further. His behavior suggested that he was not there to enjoy history or tradition, but rather to create his own version of entertainment, no matter who he might offend in the process. His presence was like a fluorescent stain on a classical painting, disturbing the centuries-old harmony of the place. And from the provocative gleam in his eyes, it was clear he planned something more than just watching. Carlos approached the guard area with deliberately slow steps, filming every movement with his cell phone. "Hey, toy soldier!" he provoked loudly, generating a murmur of discomfort among those present. Thomas stood firm, his eyes fixed on the horizon, as if the taunt was just another London breeze. "Guys, let's see if he's real," Carlos announced to his virtual audience, getting even closer. He began to make faces and exaggerated gestures in front of the guard, while some tourists walked away embarrassed. An elderly lady shook her head disapprovingly, whispering something to her companion. "I bet he's sleeping standing up," Carlos continued, now circling around Thomas like a vulture. "Or is it a robot? Let's find out." His voice had a tone of forced amusement as he struck ridiculous poses alongside the guard for their selfies. The sound of nervous laughter from some spectators was mixed with disapproving comments. A child tugged on his mother's sleeve, asking why the man was being so mean. Thomas maintained his impeccable posture, but his fingers imperceptibly tightened their grip on the ceremonial rifle he held. The tension in the air was palpable, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Carlos, completely oblivious to the signs of disapproval around him, was about to cross a line that should not be crossed. The palace courtyard, once filled only with light conversations and camera clicks, was now buzzing with a different energy. Dozens of cell phones pointed in the direction of Carlos and Thomas, recording every moment of the tense interaction. "This is going to be a problem," muttered a man in a suit, adjusting his glasses as he took in the scene. "Someone needs to call security," a woman whispered to her husband, who was already typing something on his phone. People began to gather in small circles, some filming, others commenting in low voices on the audacity of the inconvenient tourist. A group of teenagers approached, clearly interested in the viral potential of the situation. "He's broadcasting live," one of them pointed out, noticing the red live badge on Carlos's cell phone. Online comments began to emerge in real time, some encouraging inappropriate behavior, but most expressing outrage. A British family nearby explained in hushed tones to their children why Carlos's behavior was so inappropriate. "It's a lack of respect for our history," said the father, while the children watched the scene with wide eyes. The air became even thicker as Carlos, intoxicated by the attention he was receiving, began to approach the guard even closer. The crowd, now significantly larger, watched in tense silence, sensing that something was about to happen. The sound of cameras clicking was like a countdown to the inevitable. It all happened very quickly. In a moment of complete foolishness, Carlos stretched his arm towards Thomas's chest. His fingers grabbed one of the medals on his uniform, and with a sharp tug, he ripped it from the red fabric. The metallic sound of the decoration coming off echoed like thunder in the silence that instantly ensued. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Time seemed to freeze in that instant. The medal, a symbol of honor and bravery, dangled in Carlos's hand like an unholy trophy. His provocative smile began to falter as he realized the gravity of what he had just done. "Look, guys, I got a souvenir," he announced with a nervous laugh, his voice shaking slightly as he realized the weight of the disapproving looks. The live stream on his cell phone continued, now recording his own moment of infamy. The echo of visitors' footsteps moving away created a vacuum around the scene. A child started crying and was quickly pulled away by his mother. The sound of the cameras intensified, capturing every second of that crucial moment. The atmosphere, once charged with tension, transformed into something heavier. The smile on Carlos's face began to fade when he realized he had crossed a line of no return. The medal in his hand, still shining in the daylight, now seemed to weigh a ton. Thomas, in a precise and controlled movement, broke his static posture. His eyes, previously fixed on the horizon, turned directly to Carlos. The silence that followed was deafening. "Sir," his deep, firm voice cut through the air like a blade, "you have just committed a crime against the British Crown." The crowd watched mesmerized as Thomas, with the elegance of a feline, stepped forward. His presence, previously merely decorative in Carlos's eyes, now emanated an authority that made the tourist instinctively retreat. The cell phone in his hand was shaking, still broadcasting everything live. "This medal," Thomas continued, his voice calm but charged with authority, "was awarded by Her Majesty for rescuing a family during the Yorkshire floods." Each word weighed like lead in the air. Carlos paled, the medal slipping between his sweaty fingers. Two additional guards emerged from the sides of the courtyard, their synchronized footsteps echoing off the centuries-old stones. Online viewership soared, comments flowing in like a digital torrent. Carlos's face, once radiant with arrogance, now displayed a morbid pallor. "In the name of the Crown," Thomas declared, "you are detained." The words fell like a hammer in a courtroom, sealing the fate of the reckless tourist. Carlos's cell phone finally slipped from his hand, ending the transmission with a thud on the paved floor. The arrest was quick and methodical. The guards took Carlos to a reserved area, while a group of plainclothes police officers, who had been observing the situation for some time, took control. The tourist, now completely stripped of his previous arrogance, looked dwarfed in his neon green t-shirt. The medal was carefully collected and wrapped in a special fabric by one of the officers. Thomas, returning to his position, adjusted his uniform with dignity. The void left by the stripped decoration was like a visible scar on his chest, but his posture remained impeccable. On social media, the live broadcast video spread like wildfire. Hashtags like "Pach Disrespectful Tourist" and "Ach Guardian of the Crown" started trending. Commentators from around the world debated the incident, while royal protocol experts were called in to explain the seriousness of the offense. In the palace courtyard, life gradually resumed its rhythm. Tourists began taking photos again, now with a renewed respect for the tradition they witnessed. Some people approached Thomas to express their solidarity, but he kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, carrying out his duty with the same dedication as always. The London afternoon continued its course, the sun occasionally peeking through the clouds, illuminating the walls of the palace. The incident would be remembered as an example of what happens when someone confuses tradition with entertainment, respect with spectacle. The following day, British newspapers carried headlines about the incident. "Brazilian tourist detained after insulting royal guard" was the headline in the Times. Social networks were buzzing with opinions, analyses, and heated debates about cultural respect and the limits of digital entertainment. Carlos spent the night at the police station, facing formal charges of vandalism, of real property, and disorderly conduct. His passport was withheld, and he was forced to hire a local lawyer. The Brazilian embassy was notified, issuing a note that regretted what had happened and reinforced the importance of respecting local traditions. At his home in London, Thomas was dining with his wife Sarah, who was kindly sewing a new medal onto his uniform. "You maintained your composure admirably," she commented, her deft hands working with the fabric. Thomas nodded silently, his thoughts still on the incident. The viral video had sparked an unexpected debate about the role of the royal guards in the modern world. Historians and social media experts discussed how to balance preserving tradition with the digital age. Surprisingly, the incident ended up strengthening public respect for the institution. On the internet, Carlos had become a symbol of irresponsible tourism. His social media profile was flooded with criticism, leading him to deactivate it. The quest for likes and views had cost him not only his dignity, but potentially his near future. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to have access to more stories like this. 3 weeks later, in an austere room at Westminster Court, Charles faced the consequences of his actions. Wearing a borrowed dark suit and deep bags under his eyes, he barely resembled the flamboyant tourist in the viral video. The judge, a man with gray hair and a stern expression, examined the documents in front of him. "Mr. Carlos da Silva," his voice echoed through the room, "your actions demonstrate a profound lack of respect for one of Britain's oldest institutions." The translator whispered the sentence in Portuguese, while Carlos kept his eyes fixed on the ground. The sentence included a substantial fine, community service, and a ban on returning to the UK for 5 years. Furthermore, Carlos was forced to make a formal apology, which would be published in British and Brazilian newspapers. Thomas was present at the hearing, now with his medal duly restored. His testimony had been brief and precise, describing the events without emotion or rancor. After the sentence, he exchanged a brief look with Carlos, not one of anger, but of silent understanding about the weight of choices and their consequences. In Brazil, the story became a case study in tourism and digital communication schools. The video, which Carlos imagined would make him famous, actually did, but not in the way he expected. It has become a permanent reminder of how the pursuit of likes can cloud judgment and respect for the values of others.